Maker's Mark versus Bulleit Bourbon, the head-to-head you've been searching for, apparently. Hello and welcome back to the channel, and yes, today I'm taking a look at Maker's Mark versus Bulleit Bourbon to find out, well, why you lot want to know so much about these two. And the reason I say that is because when I'm planning what whiskies to buy, review and so on, I try and look at what people are actually interested in and of course what I'm interested in, but if you're interested in it, then it also kind of helps. And after doing some research, it turns out that two of the bourbons in the world that most people want to know about in comparison to each other, a head-to-head test, are these two, which, I'll be honest, shocked me quite a lot, because in my mind you couldn't really get more detached from each other but still in the realm of bourbon, at least when it comes to the affordable everyday on your supermarket shelves offerings. But the people have spoken and they want to know what the difference is between Maker's Mark and Bulleit Bourbon, so today we are indeed going to find out. Just before we do though, a bit about both of these. Now they are both 45%/90 proof, which, well, makes them kind of similar, but that is where the similarities absolutely end. The mash bill on the Maker's Mark is 70% corn, 16% wheat and 14% barley. And on the Bulleit it's 68% corn, 28% rye and 4% barley, which, well, is just wildly different. Maker's Mark is not a wheat whiskey, but it is a heavily wheated bourbon, and, well, Bulleit really playing fast and loose with what is a bourbon and what is a rye. I mean, okay, it's not quite there in terms of being a full rye, but 28% is massive when it comes to bourbon. But there is definitely a wide chasm in terms of expected flavours between the two. Quick look at the bottles. Well, they both go all out in the branding department. Bulleit opting for that old school medicine bottle kind of vibe, and Maker's with its kind of traditional wax dip top, and I don't know what the rest of that bottle shape really is, but it's a fun looking thing anyway. Right then, let's break them open. There will be no cork pop on the Makers because, as always, I want to complain about it, it's a screw cap. And that was just disappointing. I don't know which one it is, but the room in here has just become absolutely flooded with big fruity bourbon character. It's I'll be honest, I think it's the Makers, but more so than it's ever done in previous videos and pourings. It really has just gone full effervescent up in here. Colour wise, get my hand on it properly, the Makers, this one, is just a touch darker. It's a little bit more golden. That Bulleit's just got a slightly sandy colour to it, really. Very similar, but yeah, just edges it out with the Makers there, that slightly darker hue to it. But otherwise, both looking as you would expect. The nose for Makers, it is that one that's doing it. It's really punchy, big, soft. It's a whole bag of fruit in there. Like, it's ridiculous how much that's come on since it's been opened. It's always been fruity and a bit sweet, but it was kind of before it was generic sweetness, caramel, and then a big, no, not big, but a reasonable kind of smattering of kind of cherries and berries. But now there is caramel, there is brown sugar still, but then it really smacks you. It's got everything from the cherries and berries. I'm getting a bit of apple coming through, maybe a bit of pineapple, some ripe banana. I mean, it's, yeah, weirdly fruity. If you go out and buy a bottle of this and are watching this video, we're going to go, what is he talking about? It wasn't like that when I opened it. With time, with a bit of air, with a bit of aging, not proper aging, but you know what I mean, as it's become more accustomed to its environment, yeah, that has really opened up something terrific. I don't know if it's going to be too much now, because I always thought Makers was a bit chill, a bit relaxed, but maybe not today. Right then, aromas on the Bulleit. That's that. I do have a soft spot for Bulleit. That rye heavy, rich, spicy, proper spicy, little bit of an antiseptic note, proper cleansing, rubbing alcohol vibes there, but it's not offensive. It's almost reassuringly clean, and, well, that rye spice really is coming. You could argue for just about any spice in there. Cinnamon, nutmeg, pepper. Yeah, just all of them, basically. All of them. Maybe Maybe not quite curry spice, but you know, all the other ones, yeah, definitely definitely available. All the woody spices. It's kind of got a dry fruity edge to it, you know, like kind of like raisins and sultanas, but without the intense, I guess, tannin qualities that they have. I guess you get dried white grapes, right? That kind of thing. Little bit stone fruity. It's got just a touch of a nutty note, and it's more down that kind of almondy, kind of semi-sweet, semi-savoury. It's got a very pronounced note, almond, doesn't it? And it's got a hint of that. It's mostly the generic nutty dryness, but it's not peanut. It has got something else with it. But there we go. That is that. Right then. Which do we go for first? I'm going to go for the makers. We'll go for the makers. Cheers. Ooh. Some days, it doesn't matter what you drink, that first sip can just take you by surprise. Makers, as I said before, always considered a nice, soft, approachable dram. And that one, now blew my head off, and I don't know why. We'll just give it another go. Okay, easing into it now. It's not all bad news, it's not gone wrong. I do like makers, as I've said now 3 times. I definitely consider makers to be on the softer side, at least when I'm thinking about it in kind of retrospect to other things. When I'm buying a bottle, if I don't fancy something super chill, I'm not going for a makers. But on its own, give it some focus. There is some spiky, spicy, woody, just, yeah, prickly notes in there to consider. It's got some heat, actually. It really has. The spice along with it, which is all from the wood, not from any rye, because there isn't any in there. It's actually not that sweet. It's quite, let's be honest, sweet flavour leaning, vanilla, caramel, sugary goodness. But the actual sweetness level in it isn't all there. The finish is dry, hot, slightly peppery. It's a builder, this one. On your first sip, if you don't have the reaction I had just then, where it blew my head off, and honestly, it very rarely does that, this bottle, you would be fooled into thinking this is a soft, sweet, approachable whiskey. Take a few sips though, and there's some hidden heat in here for sure. It's not the breadthiest, biggest, depthiest range of flavours out of this. I've kind of covered all of it that I can taste at this point already. But yeah, I'd still think this is one for the entry level, the unsure. But just be aware that it's maybe not as soft as people like me have been saying it is all this time. Right then, another water break. And on to the Bulleit. Cheers. To say how punchy the nose is, it actually sips real easy. Of course, I've had some palate acclimatization thanks to the makers. But quite dry, lots of the obvious rye notes, slightly kind of sandy, dusty, a bit of heat with it, but nothing too intense. And then the fruity notes do start to come out. Not ever so clear though what those fruity notes are. The nose is still absolutely hitting hard with that big rye spicy thing. And the palate is true to form, but it's just got this savoury, toasty, almost cracker style flavour to it that is just kind of pitched around the edges with, well, just a bit of sweet orange and spice that kind of reminds you of Christmas, I've got to say. It's quite a festively spiced beverage, this. The finish on it, it's sweet, it's hot, it's slightly prickly, but it's not properly grating. It's just a little trickle, a nice hot toddy kind of thing going on. It is actually one of my favourite of the cheaper end, but as is the makers. I've liked both of these on and off for years, and they're almost inverse. The makers starts off looking big, soft, vanilla, fruity, and turns into this thing that slowly builds with some heat over time, and you go, actually, this is actually quite pokey, much more than I thought. Flip side, the Bulleit absolutely starts off as a big rye monster. Like, it is there, hot, and just, yeah, kind of endearing as a result. But as you sip that and expect it to get hotter and hotter and bigger, it actually chills out a bit. You get some nice savoury notes, and I think the edge of those savoury notes just kind of, I don't know, I like the expressiveness and the way that the makers changes, but there's something about that slightly more savoury profile that really sets it off with the Bulleit. Neither of these are absolute sugar bombs. You could be fooled into thinking that the makers really is a properly sweet bourbon, but only on initial appearance, and actually as you get into it, as I say, it's really not all that cloying. It's a tricky one for me to answer this. I actually don't know which one I prefer completely. And I know I'm quite fair and even on a lot of the head-to-heads that I do, normally because they're so tightly done that, well, I'm kind of splitting hairs, literally. This, though, there's a gulf apart in them, and despite that, I'm still kind of liking the same things, just as I said, in reverse. I think the Bulleit is a better all-rounder, probably is a better mixer, is probably more attuned to kind of eating kind of highly flavoured foods with, stuff like that. The Makers, I think, sits well on its own. It's on its own drop, and when you do that, it is pretty damn tasty. But there you have it. Which one do you want to go for? Well, if you want the big proper spice hit, the Bulleit is your way. If you want something a little bit softer and interested in what wheat whiskies are like, then yeah, I have to say the Makers. But my experience is actually, I rather like the wheated Makers, but I'm not that mad on a lot of other wheated bourbons, so it might be a bit of a red herring. On the flip side, I've actually had loads of ryes that are nowhere near as spicy as this Bulleit rye, because not all of the spice in it is coming from that 28% rye content. So yeah, again, I'm really splitting hairs here, but I'll be entirely honest, if I'm sat facing this dilemma in a store, I'm probably still going to buy the Wild Turkey 101 because it kind of sits here in the middle. It is just, it's got some of this nice, rich kind of, you know, the more savoury, discerning tones of the Bulleit, but it's got as much and more of the sweet caramel bourbon stuff as the Makers, and as a result, is a kind of better compromise. But we're talking about these two, and actually don't think you can go wrong with either. But for me, if I was just to be like, which bottle are you buying now, it's going to be the Bulleit. But that's just a personal preference thing. They are both absolutely fantastic. And to be honest, that really is all I've got to say about it. So as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you haven't already, subscribe if you will be so kind. And I'll catch you next time. Cheers.